Okay, so in week 5, I'm really just trying to now give you a framework that helps you understand and explain from a academic or a scholarly or an intelligent point of view, depending on which language you want to use. The main thing here is that what a lot of students, including myself, when I was a student, didn't realize is that when we think of government in the United States, what we don't realize or we don't remember is that these were built on theories that were popular in the early 1700s, and really kind of going back to the 1400s. So there's this whole kind of thing of colonialism that you might want to explore, and how that influenced people's thoughts. But today, in political science especially, or in social science, and this relates directly to criminal justice, and on this slide I want to make that as clear as possible. There's three real consistent theories that you'll come across. And unfortunately, a lot of teachers won't necessarily tell you which one they're talking about in class, but my hope is that by going through this class together, you'll be able to see what they're doing in other classes. So, the three are the constructionist, pluralist, and elitist. And I have 3 separate videos for you to watch that goes into more detail. But I have just 3 ways of remembering this. And the first one is the constructionist view is thinking about we're constantly making, challenging, reinforcing social arrangements, rules, costs, and benefits. And in my video, I'll tell you about the bodega cat, right? So the bodega cat is domesticated. It's not running wild in the streets because it's being taken care of, but it also has a role, right? It has a capitalist role. It keeps the mice away. It entertains customers, but it also changes the behavior of people as they're in the bodega. And so there's this kind of constructionist viewpoint, is that objects tend to have an influence over humans in a way that the other 2 theories don't quite take into account. The pluralist approach is probably the most common approach among academics, and it's a very idealist, optimistic idea. It kind of assumes that there's equal opportunity for everyone if they just organize, if they vote, if they get involved. And a good example is the Mothers Against Drunk Driving campaign, in that some women got together in the 70s and the 80s. They lobbied the government. They got some legislation that makes it, the punishment harsher. There's an advertising campaign. There's a kind of all this stuff. And so the number of drunk driving deaths, has gone down over time. The problem with the theory, I think, there's a lot of the safety standards of cars has also gone up. It also, predictability wise, is not great because with automated cars, right, or self-driving cars, people might still be getting drunk. So it's hard to see what the goal was there, and how to prove that the thing, happened because it was of these people organizing. The final one is very common among ordinary folks, but dismissed quite a bit by academics, is that decision making should be left to the experts, and it's actually the wealthy who are doing everything. And so you just ask, the Trump supporters, Elon Musk, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. I hope you're seeing the contradiction there, right? Like, if everybody thinks that their enemy is running the government, then I guess everybody's right. So that kind of is why pluralism kind of came out of this idea, is that elitism can't be right because one group doesn't control anything. And even within a group, as you saw within the Republican Party, elites fight with each other. So Mitt Romney is an elite, but he doesn't get along with Donald Trump. And so, that leads to pluralism. Pluralism doesn't quite explain enough of, it doesn't work, right? We try to apply it in social situations as a theory, or in lab experiments, and it doesn't quite explain human behavior, especially as it relates to objects, right? The first 2, pluralism and elitism, actually don't talk about objects at all. They only talk about social relations, as if there's no influence by the environment, or by structures, right? By unequal power relations. So over to the right is, how kind of theories within social science kind of move forward. So there's the ones that follow the scientific method, which became a lot more popular after the 1920s, but even more so in the last 20 or 30 years. Whereas the ones that you're probably used to, are not based in science, right? They're based in kind of looking at texts and oftentimes looking at writings from the 1700s or something. So, or even before. So they'll look at a theory like John Locke's and they'll say, logically this makes sense. The problem is when you take a theory like Locke's or even Darwin's for that example, and you apply it in the real world, they don't make sense. They don't actually work out the way that the theories, thought they did. So that's why the scientific method has become more useful. And so there's a lot of experiments like the prisoner's dilemma, the Zimbardo experiment, which is, people start to take on a certain attitude based on the role. So it's not really that they had anything, inside of them. It's more about the structures. So I'll get into this more, but criminal justice has a lot of assumptions that are built in that we have to unpack in classes as you go on. So you're going to have to think about how crime is socially constructed. You're going to have to think about what due process is. You're going to have to think about how to use analogies in legal reasoning. You're going to have to think about why corrections officers behave a certain way at home, but then they behave somewhere, differently somewhere else, like the prison. You'll have to think about ethics and policing and how that relates to training. And so how you kind of view participation in designing government will influence what you believe those theories in criminal justice are more believable to you, right? So the more theories you can kind of better understand, the easier it will be as you kind of go through this process.